All right, well, good evening again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this ninth and last installment for the year of the Boardroom series. I'm Bonnie McKewon with the Northwest District Office of the State Library, and tonight I'm joined by my friend and colleague Becky Heil with the Southeast District of the State Library. Thanks for joining us, Becky.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Welcome, everyone.
Well, yes, this has been quite the series. The Boardroom series started in actually 2017, and 2018 marked a repeat. We started in February, though, of this year, and we're concluding now in October after 9 months. Time flies. We're glad you're here with us. Each time in the Boardroom series, I show this slide showing two important publications from the State Library, the Iowa Library Trustees Handbook and In Service to Iowa, Our Public Library Standards. Both of these publications we refer to in this webinar and nearly every other webinar we do, and they are both available on the State Library's website. There at the bottom of the screen you see the links to the pages that will take you there. Here is where we're headed tonight with the topic 7 Habits of Effective Boards, with a nod to author Stephen Covey, who you know is the author of 7 Habits of Effective People. I think he's even done a book called Effective Families. That's where I borrowed the title from, but the actual content for tonight comes from an article that I wrote for the Iowa League of Cities magazine. Their monthly magazine is called CityScape, and they contacted the State Library asking for an article about public library boards, which tickled us. And so I wrote an article called The 7 Habits of Effective Boards, and happily it was published a couple of weeks ago. So this webinar is based on that article, and Becky and I also want to use tonight's program as a way of circling back to some of the topics we covered in the Boardroom series this year. We won't touch on each and every one, but we will reference a couple of them, and we hope to hear from you tonight as well. We really want to hear how you would assess your board's habits. How habitual for your board are the things that we'll talk about tonight. We definitely want to hear your takeaways, the changes you've made. So we'll talk about the magazine article and those 7 habits. We also, again, want to hear from you some of your favorite takeaway moments, some of the changes you may have made as a result of attending these webinars. All right, I referenced CityScape Magazine a few minutes ago. It's a monthly publication from the Iowa League of Cities. So if you're not familiar with this, it would be a good publication to get a hold of. There's a couple of ways you can do that. As I understand it from the League's website, anyone can access a PDF version of this magazine, and you do that just by requesting, send an email. The email you'll find on the League website there, you see the address. Just request a PDF version of it and you'll get hooked up that way. Now, city governments who are members of the League of Cities are probably getting paper copies of the magazines mailed to them. And it depends on the different it depends on population size. Depending on population will depend on how many paper copies you guys actually receive. So it's worth inquiring with your city clerk or your mayor or council people if they're getting the League magazine, CityScape, if they're getting multiple copies of it. Maybe when they're finished reading it, they can send it toward the library board. But if not that way, a PDF copy works just fine, and it's a really nice way for you guys to be in touch with the issues of that are going on in city government, some trends, issues, stories from Iowa cities large and small. It's a cool magazine. So what we want to do, Becky and I want to take this article 7 Habits of Effective Boards that was published in CityScape a couple of years ago, and make that the gist of our conversation tonight. So we will do that by looking at each of these habits, and we'll both read to you the paragraph connected with the habit, and we'll have some illustrations for what we mean by it. So here we go with habit number 1, which says to debate honestly and act decisively. From the article, the paragraph says, choose a strong president, someone who ensures that no one person dominates the conversation, but that all voices are heard. Effective boards don't continually, let's table that, or tolerate insufferable situations. Rather, effective boards act decisively as a group and support the collective decision. So there's our number 1 habit, and as a way of illustrating how best to for everyone to find their voice, to ensure that everyone participates, to be sure that everyone is reading the material prior to their board meeting and ready to make decisions if decisions are warranted. I want to refer you to this assessment in the Iowa Trustees Handbook. There are, in fact, 3 different evaluations that library boards can use to evaluate themselves. This one is a self-evaluation, and it asks each individual trustee to kind of gauge their own behavior, their personal behavior, what they do prior to coming to board meetings, and how they kind of interact with the group. There's another assessment that asks you to evaluate the board as a group. How does the board come together collectively to make its decisions? And the third one is called Toward Tech-Savvy Trustees. We talked about that last month, actually. So refer to the Trustees Handbook, if you would, for any of these 3 evaluations. What you see here comes from the individual evaluation, and you can see how these things kind of speak to individual behavior. I come to meetings having already read the information relevant ahead of time. I'm comfortable with the board's decision-making process. I abide by the majority opinion. And importantly there too, to support the board's decision publicly. It's fine to disagree, but once a decision has been made, everyone really needs to have that public face out there in your interactions with people, and not talking badly about the conversations that happen at board meetings, or disagreeing publicly with something that happened, and treating others with respect, listening openly to their opinions. All of that leads to, I think, boards effectively being effective in their debate, being honest in their debate, and acting decisively.
And I have a couple of things to add to this one too. Part of that debate, honestly, I think has to do with remembering to not have those conversations outside the boardroom. We don't want people coming to the board meeting with their minds already made up. So I'm sure you've all served on boards before or been a part of a decision-making body where, 2 or 3 of them kind of got together at, in the parking lot or after some other meeting, and they said, well, how are we going to handle this? And they've sort of got their minds made up, and they can come to the meeting. So part of that debate, honestly, is making sure that there's not those discussions aren't happening outside the boardroom. And then I've got another one. I have served on a lot of boards, and one of the most frustrating things to me, and I think it has to do with that act decisively, and that is not revisiting those decisions. We came to the meeting to make a decision. We had open and honest discussion. We had some kind of a vote, and as Bonnie said, we now have to support that publicly. But then we don't go back next month and say, you know what, I think we don't really like this decision, and somebody brings up the issue again. And I have served on boards where 3 and 4 and 5 meetings in a row, the same issue keeps coming up. So that act decisively, I think, helps us remember once that decision is made,
Yeah.
that we need to kind of follow
great
through
points.
with that one.
Of course. Our question for you is, what is your assessment then of how your board deliberates issues and reaches decisions? Well, here is our habit number 2 as you continue to think about just how habitual are these things for your own boards. Habit number 2 from the article says, develop thoughtful public policy. And the paragraph goes on to say, library boards must be mindful that they are adopting public policies for a public service. They should take care to avoid writing policies that are reactionary or punitive, but instead keep community interests at the forefront. So you may remember, those of you who attended the Boardroom webinar in May, we had an entire webinar in the Boardroom series devoted to policies. It was called Policies for Results, based on this book from the Public Library Association. And it truly is one of my favorite workshops. It's one of my favorite webinars. I've gone around the globe doing workshops based on policies for results because it's such a fresh way for directors and boards alike to think about and to approach policy development. I won't go through the gist of the whole webinar from back in May, but just know that you will find that recording, again, back on the State Library's website. You can find the recording from Policies for Results. And this is what we talked about. I'll just give you this really quick summary because this really is really at the heart of the whole concept behind Policies for Results. It's broken out into these 4 distinct parts of a policy. It really is a very fresh way about thinking of policy development. And it's a great way to underscore the board's role in policy development versus the director's role versus the staff's role. So just this summary, the philosophy statement should lead off every policy that you're writing. The philosophy statement helps you answer the why behind a service or a program. Why does the library provide specific services and programs? When you answer the why, you're really talking about your community. You're talking about the level of excellence that you hope to deliver in library service to your community. And coming up with a philosophy of service, probably not very often talked about as you're deliberating policy. You probably get pretty often into the weeds of regulations and procedures. Those are typically what directors and boards talk about, but I love to see the conversation begin. And the approach with Policies for Results really urges your conversation to begin with a philosophy statement. And that's definitely something for the board to approve, the philosophy. Then you move into regulations. The regulations piece of a policy answers the question, what do your patrons need to know in order to take advantage of a library service or program? What do your patrons need to know? Those are the regulations, and again, those are the conversations you're probably having very, very frequently. We want the boards to be involved in the philosophy discussion, definitely in the regulations, because this really impacts your patrons, your users, and what your users should hope to expect. So the other 3 pieces have to do with procedures, which is what the staff is engaged in, and guidelines, also what the staff is engaged in. Boards don't need to weigh in on these 2 aspects of it. These are for the staff to manage. So that's Policies for Results. If you would like, again, to hear more about this, just refer to the webinar from back in May. Here is one more illustration as we talk about policies. And I think you've seen this a time or two. I've used this technique, this board business calendar. You can use this in a variety of ways. this way is to illustrate that you could set aside certain months of the year to make sure that you're having some of those policy reviews going on. Standards, again, call for your library to adopt 4 major policy categories and to review those policies periodically. So if you bring a calendar to the process, you're able to put some of those policy topics onto the calendar. So this is just a suggestion. In May, you could review your collection policy, maybe in August, your internet policy, right? In December is a great month to review your planning document and see what progress you've made. But use this kind of a calendar technique, and it really helps keep your board meetings focused, and it gives you that month at a glance look at how to develop your agenda as well. It's a pretty slick trick. I believe, Becky, we're ready for habit number 3.
I am up, that's right. So advocate for advancements. And the article says library trustees should be true citizen advocates, supporting the library's budget, services, and the staff who make those services happen. So what exactly does advocate mean, or advocacy mean? It's one of those things that library boards tend to get a little scared about. They don't necessarily think they want to be going to Des Moines and lobbying their legislators. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that's not the only thing that we're advocating with. That's not the only piece of advocacy. So let's go back to the Library Trustees Handbook, and you'll see one of the top 5 roles, and these are the roles that show up in our handbook. One of the top five roles is advocating throughout the community. As governing and administrative boards, you guys have a great deal of authority over a whole lot of decisions that are happening. And that also means that you then have a lot of influence in your communities. So one of the definitions of advocacy is it's a way to influence decision making to create the desired policy or funding change. So we're advocating for some kind of change. We can advocate on the local level, the regional level, the state level, the national level. There's a whole lot of ways that we can sort of take that up as we're working through it. And I like to tell people everybody can be an advocate for the library. Certainly it's one of those 5 roles of the board members, but everyone needs to be doing that. And it's not just advocating at the city council table, but it's talking to the person who sits next to you at church. It's talking to the person in the grocery store and talking about all the cool things that are going on at your libraries. So here are a couple of quotes that again you'll see in the Trustees Handbook, and I really like the one on the right there. It's the one in the slides that I use when I talk about advocacy. So we start out by saying advocacy is a primary role, but then that middle piece is my favorite part. You serve as the connection between the local community and its public library. And one of the ways this role has been written before is it says library trustees should advocate for the library in the community and advocate for the community. And for a while that sort of threw me off a little bit. I get advocating for the library in the community. Like I said, you're talking to the person at the parade and at the city council and at the grocery store. But that second part sort of threw me off a little bit. Advocate for the community. And one of the things that finally clicked when I thought about that is when you are sitting at that board table, you are bringing the needs of the community to that table, and so you are advocating for them at the library level, and I really like that a lot. Libraries need to be advocating to ensure that they've got the resources they need to provide that high quality service to the community. That's what we're there for. We want to constantly improve the services and make them the highest quality that we possibly can. I went back through some of my other notes and I found this information. Some of you are probably familiar with the Pew Research Center. They do a lot of polling. They're very well respected. They focused on libraries a couple of years ago, over about a 3 or 4 year period. And one of the findings that came out of that Pew study is elected officials believe that libraries are important and they support them. So, they did all of this polling and they found out that elected officials really do think libraries are good for their communities. They're important and they're supported. But they also found out that those same elected officials don't believe that libraries need more funding. So one of our roles as advocates is to make sure that disconnect doesn't happen. We can't be important, and the elected official support needs to translate into that more funding. So again, we can have that high quality service. So these are some of the things. There was a whole webinar on advocacy at the library level, and so these are some of the things that you guys talked about at that point. Certainly financial gains is one that we talk about. The trustees know those community needs, and therefore, because you know what the community needs, you also know what the library needs then in order to help with those community issues that are out there. If you don't ask for that money for the library, who else is going to do it? So we really want to make sure that boards are out there advocating for those financial gains. One of the most frustrating things in my entire career is when I go and talk to a board or a group of county librarians who've gotten together, and they say, we're not going to ask the supervisors for more money this year because we don't know what we would really do with it. Or, well, we know things are tight, so we won't bother asking for more money. And to me, that is such a primary role of trustees and library staff, is making sure that we've got the money to make those advancements. And technology advancements is absolutely one of them. Frequently, the library is the only place where people can come for that broadband access. Imagine being a student with a laptop that was issued by your school, and you're supposed to go home and do homework, and your family doesn't have internet at home. The library can sometimes be the only place where they can get that. So again, boards are, it's imperative that we know what those needs are out in the community and that we're advocating for that, for those needs. And then intellectual freedom. The intellectual freedom is the ability for everyone to be able to seek and find information from all points of view. And again, there are very few places in our communities where you have access to that. So we need to be very forward with talking to people about making sure that libraries can provide that free access for all ideas that are out there. It's one of the fundamental reasons for libraries to be around. And so again, I think that's something that we need to advocate for. One of the things that I have heard in the past, and I have shared with a lot of library boards, is when you're going out for a new building and you're doing a campaign or some type of referendum, frequently you will hear it takes 3 tries. You go out that first time and you do the referendum, and it may fail. But at least you've gotten on people's radar. All of a sudden they're thinking about a new library maybe. And then you go out that second time, and it might fail a second time, but you start thinking about, people are now starting to understand a little bit more about the issues, and frequently it takes the 3rd time. So that, I think, is also an important point with lobbying. You might be going to meetings for an entire year and not gain anything. Or, county meetings, I've heard, again, they go to the Board of Supervisors, and 3 years in a row they went, and the board said, we just don't have money to give you, and it's not until that 3rd year that you finally get something.
Well, I think we don't want to put the library in the same category as emergency services, because I don't think we'll win that argument, but I think we can definitely put the library into the conversation as essential service. So don't equate with emergency services like police and fire protection, but take it from the angle of an essential city service and everything that the library can provide to a community, so that individuals don't have to try to purchase it, provide it, access it on their own. All right, well, we'll look at habit number 4, which says to keep current and tech savvy. Back to the CityScape article, the rest of the paragraph reads, Library trustees demonstrate another aspect of advocacy when they pledge to keep current and aware of trends. When trustees are even modestly tech-savvy, they become stronger advocates for the library's technology needs. So that was the method to my madness behind this idea of tech-savvy trustees, and one very easy way to feel more connected and more connected to our education events, with state library workshops, with local library news and statewide programs, is by receiving the Monday Morning Eye-Opener. Earlier you saw CityScape Magazine from the League of Cities. That's a great publication to know about and hopefully to subscribe to. That helps you become better informed about city government issues, so that's another nice way to keep current and stay informed. The Monday Morning Eye-Opener from the State Library is a weekly newsletter, and it's a great way to make those specific library connections. We're forever touting our education programs in the Eye-Opener and all sorts of other articles. So if you would like to begin receiving the Eye-Opener, if you don't yet receive the Eye-Opener but you'd like to, and who wouldn't? Why wouldn't you like to receive this? It's a breezy little newsletter that comes to your inbox every week. You can let your director know, and your director can email me, or you can email me directly, and I will add your name, or I will add your email to the recipient group. Now, there is a way for people to subscribe yourselves. It's just kind of a convoluted way for me to try to explain it, so I won't try to explain it in our time tonight. Just trust me. We'll cut to the chase, and it's easier for me to add you into the recipient group, which I'm happy to do. So speaking of the method to our madness, that's actually a Shakespeare quote, as you know. And the method to our madness in terms of tech-savvy trustees, that again is one of my favorite programs that I've put together for boards. And I feel like I've gone around the globe also doing toward tech-savvy trustees. It's especially fun to do in person because there's some games that we can play in person, but we took a crack at this September. It was the September topic of the Boardroom series, and so we did talk about tech-savvy trustees. And as the article said, even when trustees are modest users of technology themselves, they become better advocates for the library's technology needs. We don't need power users, but just having some modest level of understanding really helps boost the board's appreciation for the technology needs of the library. And you know, as we're careening toward the year 2019, we really just can't afford to be dismissive of technology. Boards have to plan for and budget for computer replacement, for software upgrades, for increased broadband speed, ebook access, and all the rest. So that is one way of keeping current and tech savvy, and here's another way. We talked about this at the September installment of the Boardroom as well, and this came to me with a thud one day. I often join local board meetings, and I'll hear the board members say, you know, we pay the bill for this Gale package, whatever that is, but we don't really know what it is or what it can do. And I will still hear that board members, when I'm at local board meetings, they will say, you know, I know we pay for bridges, but I don't use ebooks. I don't know how. Those kinds of demonstrations of those kinds of products that your library is subscribing to, whether it's the Gale package or the Bridges ebook service, those are just really, really valuable demonstrations to include at your local board meetings. So do what you can to carve out some time to offer your trustees some demonstrations, some presentations like that. These are some websites that you could demonstrate if you set aside some time at a local board meeting, 15 minutes every couple of months, to demonstrate your own library website, and we'd love to give you a tour of the state library's website too, followed by the Iowa Library Association, the PLA ALA website, and the one there on the screen, ARSL, is near and dear to Becky's heart. She's a past president of the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. All of these would be great websites to demonstrate. And then check out these websites: Libraries Transform, Web Junction, Project Outcome, United for Libraries. All of these would make really good websites to share with your boards. And I think not just speaking about them, but actually demonstrating them live at a board meeting is what really makes these websites come alive, and it makes the resources on these websites much more memorable. Yeah, you know what, Roberta? I one time did I did a class a couple months ago. It was a county-wide board education event, and I had a lot of these kinds of websites in my slides, one after the other, and just kind of spoke really briefly to them. And the best outcome I heard from that class was that a board told me they decided they were going to tackle one of those websites every month, and they were going to assign it to everybody. In the intervening weeks, go look at Library Transform in May, and then at the June meeting, they came back and talked about it. At June meeting, they assigned Web Junction to everybody to go look at. At the July meeting, they came back and talked about it. What a great outcome. That really tickled me to hear that boards actually spent some time going to these sites. Here's another one that we want our trustees to know about, talk about toward tech-savvy trustees. This will make you a tech-savvy library if you're participating in the EDGE. We talked about this last month at the September board meeting. The state library is paying for full-on access to the EDGE resources for a full year. It's essentially a technology assessment toolkit. So your library needs to sign up for an EDGE account, and then you will be able to take this technology assessment that asks you questions about your library's level of technology. How many public computers are available, for instance? What is the newness of those computers? What about the currency of the software that's loaded on those computers? What's your broadband speed look like, and do you have wireless access? Do you provide downloadable ebooks and audiobooks? Do you subscribe to resources like Gale and other digital subscriptions? So that's what the EDGE technology assessment is all about. It's going to be a pretty easy kind of a questionnaire to answer, because it's not asking you for any numbers. It's asking you for an answer to the questions that are posed. It asks you, or you answer those questions that are posed with a yes, a maybe, and a no. So it's not as daunting as it might appear, and we at the State Library are very anxious for Iowa libraries to take that EDGE assessment. Do be sure to ask any of us at the district offices if you want more information about this.
And what a great testimonial from Nancy. Thank you,
Oh, it
thank
is
you,
for
thank you. We
unsolicited,
really do think
but
it's
Nancy, I
amazing
might
and
come
can be
calling
used
to
for
you
strategic
again
planning. I think
and have
it's
you give me a
fabulous.
testimonial,
So
because
thank you,
Becky
Nancy,
and I and our colleagues in the other
unsolicited
districts are
testimonial.
doing lots of presentations about the EDGE, and we love to have those testimonials. All right, where are we at? I think we're at number 5.
And that is me. So Bonnie actually talked about this a little bit, so maybe we can make up a little bit of time here. In the on the trustee webpage on the State Library website and in the trustee handbook, we have 3 types of board assessments. So evaluating the service of the board. It was habit number 5. Effective boards willingly ask, how are we doing? Individual trustees gauge the skills they bring to the boardroom. The entire board can evaluate how they work together collectively. And also don't forget about the fact that boards evaluate the library director's performance as well. So this first one that is up here is that self-assessment. So this is one you can take a look at on your own. It doesn't have to be shared with anyone, doesn't have to be made public at all, but take a look at the items that are on there. Do you know the library's mission statement? Do you treat other board members with respect and listen to their opinions? So I think this is a great one to just sort of take stock of how you feel that you are doing as an individual board member. Then there's a second one in here that's actually done individually, but then it's discussed as a board. So this is not just about you personally, but about how you work together as a board. So I think there's this can make for some really great discussion, and I would suggest putting this on that board calendar that Bonnie talked about, you know, a month every couple of years, to take some time at a board meeting, ask everybody to do this, and take a look at those answers as a group. Then it can make for some really great discussion. So this is thinking about things like, what do we need to change as a board? You know, we go through this and we come up with maybe some deficiencies here. What could we change that would be able to help correct that? It talks about things like recruitment or orientation. Do you have complete budget authority? There are some cities that try to take that away from boards. And so if you find out that that's something you need to be working towards, this assessment is one way that can help you find that. Another one that I really liked on here is, are we representative of our community? I can't remember what number that is, but that's on one of the ones at the bottom there. Do we, those of us sitting around that board table, actually represent our community and what it looks like? I just literally heard this comment this morning, or at lunch today. I was with a couple of librarians, and one of them said to me, there are no people on their board, there is no one who has kids under the age of 30. So, you know, what does that say about how they are able to represent their community? So I think that's sort of a really important point there. Again, do you advocate? Is that one of the things that you as a board do? Another one, are you always wanting to learn more? What is your feeling about education? We're going to talk about that one in the next habit that we're going to hit, number 6. Do you want to learn more about the library? Are you looking to learn more about your job as a trustee? Are you looking to learn more about some of the national initiatives that are out there? So I think, again, that who we are as a board can be really important. And really quickly, I'm going to take a little bit of time to go through this. The book that's up here, 5 Steps of Outcome-Based Planning and Evaluation for Public Libraries, is something that you might want to think about getting for your public library. We in libraries are very good at counting things. We know how to count the number of children's programs that we've done. We know how to count the number of people that have attended those. But when we're talking about outcome-based evaluation, we're talking about, you can see there on the slide, outcomes means the benefit to people. So it's not just how many people showed up, but what changed in their skill, in their knowledge, in their attitude, in their behavior, in their life status. What changed because they came to the library? So one of the ways that we like to talk about this, and this is a completely free resource, when we're thinking about programs like story hours or a program to teach people how to write resumes, sometimes we can get hung up on the fact that, you know, I only had 3 people show up at this program that I spent, you know, hours putting together, and then we did as a group on, you know, maybe something like how to write a better resume. So, you know, we put all this time and effort, and then only 3 people show up. Again, that's focused on those numbers. What about the fact that somebody comes to you after that program and says, because of what I learned at that library program, I got a job. Or because I was able to come and use your computers every day, I now have a job in the technology industry. So what Project Outcome gets to is the programs that you do and making sure that they're effective in that, making those changes in people's lives. So these are some of the service areas that they have their surveys broken up into. So they've got this early childhood literacy survey. So after a story hour, you ask people to fill out this survey. They are pre-done questions. You will get back, after they fill that all out, you will get back information that you can then take to people and talk about the outcomes of your programs. Habit number 6, reach out for assistance. Iowa Library Boards enjoy a highly effective support network, starting with the staff as well as people at the state library. So trustees also have to pledge then to become lifelong learners, knowing that board education and training is just a call or a click away. And that's what Bonnie and I do for a living is, we are your support team. We are there to help you with those questions and those issues. But we need to know that you are reaching out to us. We need to know that board members want to be lifelong learners. So again, Bonnie showed you the State Library website, I'm sure, over the course of these 9 months, and we looked at it a little bit tonight. I always tell people your first click should be on that blue For Libraries tab. That's where you're going to find those little tabs that have the alphabet tabs that will allow you to get to any of the resources that we have for libraries. A couple of things that I want to tell you really quickly about that For Libraries tab. There is a Contact Us page that talks about the districts. So take a look, find out what district you're in, contact your district consultant. I get calls every week and emails every week from trustees who say, we've got this issue at the library, can you help us with that? And that's what we're here for. We are that support. The second thing then Bonnie's already talked about is that CE page, the continuing education page, where we have all those archived webinars, and those are more great places for everyone to sort of keep up with that continuing education that needs to go on there. And then the third one that I really want to highlight is our trustee page. We are in the process of sort of doing some renovation on the website. So the trustee page has some fewer things than what we used to have, but we are in the process of putting some of those back. That is where you will find the trustee handbook as well. So those are just a few of the places that you can go to get that information and help reach out for that assistance. So the State Library has a couple of roles. One of our roles is consulting, and you can see the list there of some of the consulting type things that we provide. One of my favorite ones to do are the roundtables, because when I gather all those librarians together in one room and we start talking about a topic, I can expound for hours on some of those topics, but what's really cool about those roundtables is that you get to hear from each other. And a planned part of that day, we're together for 3 hours, and a planned part of that is listening to each other and finding out what other librarians are doing on that particular issue. And I will tell you, I've actually had board members come to the roundtables. If it's something they're particularly interested in, they have really enjoyed coming and listening to the other libraries and hearing about what else is going on. The other thing that we've got then is the continuing ed, and like I said, that's on our website. You can go back. We certainly have credit classes throughout the year like these. We do them both face-to-face and online. We also do them countywide. I was talking to Roberta about that. The Van Buren County Libraries got their boards together, I think it was probably a year ago now, and I came and did some training for them, and we had some really good discussion with the board members that showed up. So we are happy to come and do those in-person, face-to-face things for your county. We certainly do statewide ones as well. We support the support staff, we support the directors and the boards. And then just the list down there of some of the topics that we actually have as well. So just really quickly, those of you who have done accreditation in the last 2 years have noticed probably that we have changed the tier level of this education standard. We now ask at the very lowest level, Tier 1, that all members of the Board of Trustees participate in continuing ed every year. And so from that respect, we would like to say thank you to all of you who are here in this room, because you have obviously embraced this and have gone out of your way to find that training and participate in that continuing ed during the year. So really clearly you all are on top of things in doing this. I'd like to think that our boards are willing to put in this time and come and learn. And, you know, Bonnie and I try to make it a little bit more fun than just sitting there for an hour and a half. We definitely have trustees who will meet that requirement and some who have not. And one of the things I try to remind people is we at the State Library are not keeping track. You know, you have 9 board members and, you know, only 6 of them did any training at all, and 3 of them only did an hour, and, you know, these didn't do any, and these did 6 hours. What we want to ensure is that you know that board members are out there doing training, and that's really more to it. They do not have to set up an account if they want to do the classes through the CE catalog. They do, but otherwise they can just come to the classes that we have like these. You did not have to have an account to come to these classes. Oh, I think, John, at Leon, when you go to fill out the accreditation for this standard, you've noticed probably that we are asking for more types of verification. For this standard, the verification it's either a drop-down or a blank box, and we ask you to tell us about the variety of ways that your board got it. So we are not saying you need to make a check mark that, you know, this person attended 3 hours on this date. What we're asking you to tell us is, you know, maybe you talked about magazine articles at every board meeting for the last year. So if you spent 10 minutes, that was 120 minutes, your board got 2 hours. If somebody wasn't there, we're okay with that.
I found it best if you just record what your people are doing in your minutes from month to month, and that's an easy way to backtrack, to show what people have been doing. All right, we are up to habit number 7, and then we will wrap it up. Our 7th habit for effective boards: to foster respectful relationships. Back to the CityScape article, the paragraph reads, all of the above, so all of these previous 6 that we've talked with you about, will flounder if board members are not intentional about maintaining healthy relationships. Effective library boards demonstrate a high EQ, emotional intelligence, respecting each other, the library staff, and city officials. So that's habit number 7, and we want to acquaint you with yet another article from CityScape Magazine. This one came out in November of 2017, and it's called Frustrated. As you can see from the summary here, it says that sometimes it's not easy being a city official. The challenges and frustrations of serving in a public role can mount. But those that are able to find ways to cope with difficult aspects of the job will enjoy the rewards of providing a vital community service. I'll just read just a little bit from this Frustrated article. It says that municipal governments are required to provide their services even to, quote, bad customers. So while most private sector businesses have the ability to turn away a customer that is causing disruptions, cities don't really have that same option. Many cities have recurring problems with the same folks on a monthly basis, whether it's nuisance properties or unpaid utility bills, all of which can be exasperating. Another section of this article says that as a government unit, cities collect and spend public dollars. The majority of revenue for most cities in Iowa come from property tax dollars, which brings expectations and scrutiny from those who are paying their property tax obligations. While city officials understand and welcome transparency, it can still be stressful to continually ensure that every dollar is being spent wisely and to know that the city cannot perform every service that might be requested by its citizens. So it's just a good article for you to read. I think it gives you a new appreciation for what it means to be a city servant, an elected official. You know how hard your jobs can be on occasion as appointed library trustees. So it's just a way to maybe come away with a renewed appreciation for your neighbors that serve as mayors and city clerks and city council people. As you think about your board's relationship with your city, you're welcome to think about this question, what you would like your city to do more of or less of. That's kind of a hard thing to think about right off, just off the top of your bean, what you would like your city to do more of or less of. I think Jackie kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier, though, when Jackie said they so seldom see city officials, mayors, and council people come to board programming. And that is very discouraging when they're continually invited, but they tend not to be very frequent library users themselves, right, or very frequent attendees at library functions. Well, Becky talked with you about outcomes and how important it is for libraries to really do more with this way of evaluating library service beyond number counting, head count, door count, books checked out, to really evaluate the difference that these essential libraries make in their communities, these essential services that we talk about. How are they really impacting people? Once again, Becky and I thank you ever so much for your participation in the Boardroom series. It's been our pleasure to talk with you throughout these 9 months, and we will have more to come in 2019. Have great holidays, and we'll talk with you in the spring. Good night, everybody.